The NBA Finals have begun. Everything just feels different now. You start seeing graphics about how this is the first time somebody's done this since Kareem or that since Duncan, and it sinks in that this is really where history and legacies are made. I think it's safe to say that with two teams facing off who haven't been to this stage in oh so long, it's all very exciting. And right in the middle of all that excitement is a star player who currently has a very strange track record on the biggest stages, but has the unique opportunity to change it all in these finals. And that's Khris Middleton. With Middleton as good as he is, each individual contest kind of feels like a game of roulette. Sometimes he goes berserk for an entire night. Sometimes he falls totally flat. Sometimes he sucks for a couple quarters, then suddenly explodes in a way that you just don't often see even from other stars. For evidence of that roller coasterish inconsistency, just look at Middleton's performance in these playoffs. In wins, he's played like an uber-efficient star, at times seeming completely unstoppable. But in losses, really with the exception of his finals debut, he has been completely and utterly abysmal, like unbelievably bad considering his standing as a player. That hot and coldness is just part of his nature. We just saw him put the Bucks on his back with Giannis out in games 5 and 6 against Atlanta to take them further than they've ever been before, but the game before that, he kind of sucked, and he definitely wasn't guiltless when Milwaukee couldn't live up to their record in the 2019 and 2020 playoffs as he fell short as the team's second star and natural closer. So again, we've seen a bit of everything from him in the big moments up to this point. But now, as he looks to leave his mark on the biggest stage in this sport, let's examine all the good and bad with Middleton and try to understand why, at the end of the day, he's just so weird. Ever since the Bucks first ascended to true contender status 3 years ago on the back of an MVP season from Giannis, I felt they had a few question marks that had to be addressed. From the jump, I wondered how the Bucks' transition-heavy offense, and particularly Giannis, would cope with a slower-paced game in the playoffs, how their general systematic rigidity would translate as teams got to see them 6 or 7 times in a series and try to disrupt their tendencies, and finally, if they had the perimeter superstar and dynamic closer they would need to compensate for Giannis' shortcomings as a skilled shot creator. AKA, could Middleton be that guy they needed? Honestly, the answer to that question has seemed to vary, and we'll get into why, but first, let's take a look at why, on his best days, it sure seems like he can be. Middleton is a pretty good playmaker and a plus defender, but at the end of the day, he's a star because he is one of the most skilled scorers in basketball, point blank. First off, he's a flamethrower from deep, having shot better than 41% from 3 this year. He took half his threes off the catch, where he was lethal as an off-ball presence, and took the other half in pull-up situations, where his shot is extremely difficult to affect as he stands at 6'7". But Middleton is unique in that, despite his marksman status, the triple is not necessarily his primary or most distinctive weapon. Instead, he thrives as one of the most prolific mid-range shooters in basketball, having made 45% of his 4.8 mid-range jumpers per game this year. He can waltz into a pull-up midi right in your mouth, or face up and clear out all the room he needs with a jab step or two, but he also has a deep bag and a variety of ways to create space for himself in that area. This year, Middleton knocked down 55% of his turnarounds and fadeaways, a ridiculous number that allows him to catch the ball anywhere in the high post and immediately attack, or just put his back to a defender and still get a good shot off. But if he's initiating from the perimeter, he can kill defenders with step backs from anywhere, having made 57% of his step back 2s and 46% of his step back 3s on the year. If he wants to get a little closer in, Middleton can shred defenders with his floater, where he converted over 51% of his attempts and is pretty ambidextrous. All of these go-to moves I just mentioned are really tough shots, and very few players have all 3 in their bag, but Middleton converts them efficiently and can get them off whenever because he only needs minimal space to do so. He's great because he's a master of difficult shot making. Damn near every shot he takes is contested because he lacks the kind of explosive athleticism or otherworldly change in pace that would generate a ton of easy looks around the hoop, but he can shoot over anybody from anywhere, and he makes a whole lot of those tough shots. So I'd say it makes sense that when Middleton is on, like any great difficult shot maker, he's electrifying and nearly unstoppable because what can you do? You may be sticking to him, you may have a hand in his face, but it just doesn't matter. At the end of the day, it's up to him to miss. And we've seen him deliver those kind of deflating moments to defenses throughout his playoff career. Just last series, he shredded Atlanta with a crucial 24th quarter points in Game 3, then followed that up with an equally impressive 23 third quarter points in Game 6, almost all on tough shots in both situations. Against the Celtics in 2018, he put on one of the most remarkable shooting displays I can remember, hitting 60% of his shots and 61% of his threes as he averaged 25 a game in a 7-game series. When those signature tough shots are all falling, Nobody can affect them. So as a defense, you're kind of just standing there helpless, waiting for him to finally slip up, and it's a pretty brutal spot to be in. But of course, those shots can't always fall. Sometimes almost none of them do, which leads to the inconsistency that has plagued Middleton far beyond just these playoffs. In fact, in 3 of his 5 complete postseasons up to this point, he's shot under 40% from the field, which is obviously very ugly, and that excludes the year he had his worst series ever, when he averaged under 14 points per game on 41% shooting in an Eastern Conference Finals loss to the Raptors in 2019. On a few too many occasions, when he's been expected to be not only a contender's second star, but their best perimeter scorer and go-to guy when it comes to winning time, he just hasn't had it. Now, I can tell you part of the reason for this inconsistency because it's directly related to Middleton's skill set. He has what I would affectionately call Jamal Murray syndrome. I touched on it in my videos about Murray and Jason Tatum, but it's a pretty intuitive concept. Players who are highly reliant on difficult shot making and don't have tools to get easy points regularly at the bucket or free throw line tend to be more inconsistent. Think about all-time signature scorers like Kobe or Jordan. Those guys carved out tough buckets, sure, but they also shot a ton of free throws. And if their mid-range looks weren't falling, they had that answer on the inside and at the stripe. Well, Middleton doesn't have that. He's not a lightning quick or physically overpowering athlete, and he took just about 3.5 free throws a game this year, a very low number for a scorer of his caliber that tells you he's no foul drawing machine. Additionally, about 15% of his shots came at the rim this year, another pretty low mark, and he converted on just 61% of his attempts in the restricted area, another well below average number. So, unlike many other great scorers, Middleton doesn't have a high probability go-to or an easy way to salvage an off night. If the tough shots aren't falling, he's just off. So that definitely accounts for a good portion of the inconsistency. But here's the thing. When it comes to guys who are defined by difficult shot making, sure, you'll have to stomach some cold shooting nights, but in the playoffs and especially in clutch moments, as the pace slows down, defense tightens up, and buckets get tougher to come across, you need them on your team. Their value just skyrockets when it gets harder to create offense for everybody else, but they're taking the same tough shots that they take and make all the time. And really, that value should skyrocket more for Middleton than anyone because of the shortcomings of his team's best player. It's hardly an option to run clutch half-court offense through Giannis, given his lack of skilled shot making, so the Bucks need Middleton to be that guy. But the weird thing is, for much of his career, he's fallen short there. Here are Middleton's combined regular season and playoff clutch stats since Milwaukee became a legit contender 3 years ago. These stats are from any game within 5 points with under 5 minutes remaining, when you should start turning to your ultimate bucket getter, and they've consistently been quite poor for Middleton. Obviously, clutch moments are only so much of a player's resume, but these are the spots where series and titles are won and lost. And yeah, you can have a bad season in the clutch because the sample size of field goal attempts isn't all that large, but 3 straight years, playoffs and regular season, of this kind of underperformance for a guy who should become his best in these moments is alarming. In total, over these 3 years, Middleton has shot 33.9% from the field in the clutch and has, on average, ranked 53rd in the league in regular season clutch points per game. Now that cannot be explained whatsoever by skill set. That just has to be mental, I would think, or really bad luck for a really long time. Regardless, Middleton's struggles there have earned him a reputation as a guy you can't always trust to close, and I've never been able to shake my questions about him there given his sketchy performances. But still, as I said, Middleton just delivered some huge clutch performances versus the Hawks, and it's not like he looks terrified to take and make big shots out there, he just hasn't done it consistently. That's why I can't make some declarative statement and say Middleton can't close in big games. Because although he may not be your typical star, best perimeter player on a contender, I don't think that's totally true. I think it's safest to just say that he's weird there. Regardless, the reality now is that this is where legacies are made. This is Middleton's chance, because guess what? All those numbers I gave you about him struggling in the clutch suddenly become irrelevant if, with the biggest task of his career on his chest, he goes toe-to-toe with CP3 and Book, 2 of the iciest closers out there, and finds a way to bring Milwaukee to victory. There was a time when the most famous moment in James Worthy's career was a boneheaded turnover, but a few years later, he turns in a couple massive performances in the finals, and now we literally call him Big Game James. My point is, you can pretty easily shed any reputation by showing up in the finals. So this is the question at hand. Now that it's all on the line, what Middleton do we get? Because here, he can't afford to go cold. He has to just be great consistently. And if he is, he'll go down in the history books. If he isn't, then I guess I'll just keep on thinking that he's pretty darn weird. To those of you who have made it this far, thank you so much for watching. As always, I hope you've enjoyed. If you have, you can check out our podcast Nerd Sesh that I do with my buddy Logan Camden. We post the full videos here to YouTube. You can also find that in audio form on Spotify, Apple, wherever you get your audio content, and I will link those in the description of this video. Right now, we're doing 2 shows a week, all on the NBA, as obviously this exciting season wraps up. So if you enjoyed this, perhaps you'll enjoy that as well. If you want to keep plugged in with the content we're doing, you can follow us on social media, Twitter at nerd_sesh, Instagram at Nerd Sesh, and TikTok at Nerd Sesh, where we are starting to crank out some more content. With that, as always, guys, thanks so much for watching. Hope you've enjoyed.